Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at something that's maybe a little unexpected in our super connected world. It's, well, it's all about privacy.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one these days.
It really is. And, we found this really interesting article titled 15 Compelling Reasons to Embrace a Life of Privacy. And it just got us thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, in a world where everybody's sharing everything as privacy,
Right.
Is it like a lost art?
Right.
Or could it actually be like this secret key to a better life?
I like that.
So we're going to dive into that today.
All right, let's do it.
So the article jumps right in and talks about privacy as like this way to set boundaries.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that can be really difficult,
Oh, it's so hard.
especially like you were saying in today's digital world.
Yeah, because everybody expects you to be, available all the time.
Right, like 24/7.
So how do we set those boundaries when, everyone's always expecting us to be online and sharing?
Well, the article suggests things like limiting social media use. Right.
So maybe you only check your accounts at certain times of the day, or you even, take a break for a while.
Yeah.
It also talks about being more careful about what you share online.
So it's not like being a hermit or anything. It's more like being more intentional about it.
Exactly.
I like that. And it also mentioned this idea of privacy being like a path to being more authentic.
Yes, and this is where I think it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because the article argues that all this pressure to share and be perfect online,
Yeah.
it can actually stop us from being our true self.
Oh, totally. And it was like you look at all those Instagram feeds and they're so perfect.
Oh,
And you're like, is that even real?
exactly. And, by stepping away from that need to always get approval from other people,
Yeah.
we can figure out who we really are without that online pressure.
So it's like privacy isn't just what we don't share, but it's also about,
It's about the freedom
yeah.
to discover who we really are. I like that. Now, the article also talked about like the link between privacy and this feeling of serenity or peace.
Yeah.
But does that mean we have to like go live in a cave?
Not at all. The article actually highlights the benefits of just having some time alone.
Okay.
When you step away from all that digital noise for a little bit, you can think more clearly
Yeah,
and process your emotions better.
that makes it. It's like our brains need a break
They do.
from all the craziness. But wouldn't that make us like less connected to other people?
That's what you might think, but the article actually says that by revealing less about ourselves,
Oh, really?
we can actually become more interesting to others.
Now, that's interesting. Always telling my friends to spill the tea.
Right.
But maybe holding back a little bit makes people more curious.
Exactly. Humans are naturally curious.
Yeah.
A little mystery can definitely make people more interested. Think about someone like Banksy.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that we don't know who they are makes them even more fascinating.
Totally. And it keeps people guessing. Speaking of mystery, the article also talks about stealth wealth,
Right.
which sounds like it's just for rich people.
Well,
But how does that relate to like everyday privacy for you and me?
that's a great question, and I think the article is using stealth wealth as more of like a metaphor
Oh,
for
s-
achieving your goals without needing to shout about it all the time.
So it's not about hiding your success. It's more about like
Right.
focusing on the journey and not needing everyone's approval.
Exactly. It's about finding satisfaction in the process, not just the end result.
And there's a practical side to it too.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, if you're always sharing your plans and dreams,
Yeah.
you're opening yourself up to judgment and unsolicited advice,
Yeah.
and even negativity from people who might not have your best interests at heart.
So by keeping some things to ourselves,
Right.
we can avoid that negativity and focus on what really matters.
Exactly. The article suggests this approach can be really empowering.
Okay.
It lets us define success on our own terms. I love that. It's about taking back control of our own stories and deciding what we want to share with the world. And speaking of choosing, what about this idea of privacy as a way to just filter out negativity in general?
Yeah, that's another important point the article makes.
Okay.
We're constantly bombarded with information,
Oh, I know.
opinions, and negativity, especially online.
It's exhausting.
It can be really draining, and the article suggests that privacy can be like a shield
Okay.
by choosing what we consume and who we interact with online.
Yeah.
We can protect our mental and emotional well-being.
That makes sense. It's like being mindful of the energy we let into our lives.
Exactly.
And I think that connects with what our listeners are always saying about avoiding information overload.
Absolutely. It's about quality over quantity,
Right.
both terms of information and relationships. And that leads to another interesting point about how privacy can actually help us build deeper connections with people.
Okay, now that I'm curious about, wouldn't being more private make us less connected?
Well, the article argues the opposite, really.
It says that by being careful about what we share, we actually build trust and intimacy
Okay.
with the people who are really important to us.
So it's like the fewer people you share certain things with,
Right.
the more special those connections are.
Exactly. It's about creating closeness
Mhm.
that comes from sharing meaningful experiences and vulnerabilities.
I was just reading about how some couples choose to keep their relationship mostly offline.
Interesting.
It's like they're protecting their space
Yeah,
from all the outside opinions and judgments.
that's a great example, and it ties into another point the article makes about the importance of solitude.
Okay.
It argues that embracing privacy teaches us to be comfortable being alone, which is so important for personal growth.
You know, I think a lot of people struggle with being alone.
I think so too.
We're so used to being connected all the time that being alone can feel, well, lonely.
It can. But the article says that solitude is actually a chance for self-discovery.
And reflection, it's in those quiet moments that we can really connect with ourselves.
It's not about isolation then. It's about being intentional,
Exactly.
choosing to spend time alone,
Yeah.
to think and feel and listen to that inner voice.
And that can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's about taking back our time and attention and focusing on what truly matters to us.
I love that. This deep dive is making me really rethink my relationship with privacy.
Too. It's not about hiding or being secretive.
Right.
It's about creating space for authenticity,
Yeah.
self-discovery, and those deep connections.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And, you know, the article goes even deeper than that.
Oh, does it?
It suggests that embracing privacy is a way of taking ownership of yourself.
Wow, that's deep. Tell me more.
Well, in a world where our data is always being collected and
Mhm.
everyone's fighting for our attention,
Right.
choosing privacy is a way of saying, my life is mine and I decide what I share.
It's like drawing a line and saying, this is my personal space,
Exactly.
and you can't cross it.
And that can be incredibly freeing, especially in a culture that often says, you're only valuable if you're visible.
This has been so insightful.
Yeah, it has.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface, though.
Me too.
But before we get lost in the deep, dark depths of privacy,
Right.
what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that privacy isn't all or nothing.
Yeah,
It's about finding a balance that works for you.
right.
Maybe it's being more mindful of your social media, or setting boundaries with your work emails, or just taking more time for yourself to think.
It's about being intentional with our energy and making choices that help us grow.
Exactly. And it's okay to experiment and see what feels right for you.
You know, what works for one person might not work for another.
Totally. It's all about finding what works for you.
And remember, privacy isn't about shutting yourself off from the world.
Right.
It's about being part of it on your own terms.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up, I think it's time for our traditional thought-provoking question.
Yes.
Okay, so think about a specific area of your life where a little more privacy could be beneficial. It could be online, your relationships, work, anything.
Yeah.
What's one small change you could make today to start cultivating more privacy in that area?
That's a great question to think about.
Mhm.
And it's perfect for our listeners who are always looking for things they can actually do.
Absolutely.
It's not just about understanding privacy, it's about putting it into practice.
Right.
So take some time to reflect on that and see what comes up for you.
Yeah, see what you discover.
And remember, we're not saying you have to become a hermit.
Definitely not.
It's about finding that balance between connection and solitude.
That feels authentic and empowering.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into privacy.
Yeah, this is great.
We hope you learned something new
And maybe even feel inspired.
to create a little more privacy in your own life.
Exactly. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
And if you want to dive even deeper into this topic, check out the article that inspired us today. 15 compelling reasons to embrace a life of privacy. It's full of great insights and tips.
You know, one thing that stood out to me in that article was how it emphasized that privacy isn't this fixed idea.
Right.
It changes over time.
Yeah, what was considered private a generation ago might be totally normal today.
Exactly, and vice versa.
It's true. Think about how much the rules around sharing personal information have changed in just the past few years.
It's crazy, right?
Like what's oversharing now might have been totally fine a while back.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder what the future of privacy will be.
Yeah.
Will we want more privacy, or will we keep going in the direction of sharing everything?
That's a question we can't answer for sure.
Right.
But it's definitely something to think about. And that's what these deep dives are all about.
We're not just giving you information.
We're exploring ideas
Challenging assumptions.
and starting new conversations.
And hopefully inspiring you to do the same. So whether you're a techie, a social butterfly, or an introvert, we hope this deep dive gave you something to think about.
Because at the end of the day, privacy is a personal choice.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out what feels right for you.
And creating a life that matches your values.
So go out there and embrace your privacy.
Or at least start thinking about it in a new way.
Thanks for joining us today.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
It's a key point the article makes. In this day and age with social media, it's like we're just bombarded with information and opinions.
And so much negativity.
It's a lot, and it can be really draining.
Oh, tell me about it. It feels like all anyone does online anymore is complain.
Right. So the article suggests that privacy can be like a filter for all that.
Okay.
By being more selective about what we consume online and who we interact with, we can protect ourselves.
Protect our, mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Our mental and emotional well-being.
Makes sense. It's like choosing what kind of energy we let into our lives.
Right. And I think that ties into what our listeners are always saying about information overload, too.
Yeah, for sure. It's about choosing quality over quantity.
Absolutely. Both in terms of the information we consume and the relationships we have. And speaking of relationships, the article makes this fascinating point about how privacy can actually help us build stronger connections with people.
Oh, really? I would have thought it'd be the opposite.
I know it seems counterintuitive, but hear me out.
Okay.
The article suggests that by being more discerning about what we share,
Okay.
we actually create a deeper sense of trust and intimacy with the people who are really worthy of our confidence.
So it's like the fewer people you share certain things with, the more special those connections become.
Exactly. It's about cultivating closeness that's based on shared experiences and being vulnerable with each other.
Not just broadcasting everything to the whole world.
Right, think about it. Have you ever noticed how some couples choose to keep their relationship pretty private?
Yeah, like they don't post about it on social media or anything.
Yeah, right. It's like they're creating this sacred space that's protected from outside opinions and scrutiny.
I like that. That reminds me of another point the article makes about the importance of solitude.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It argues that embracing privacy helps us become more comfortable being alone.
Which I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, we live in a world that's all about constant connection.
So being alone can feel kind of scary.
Right, but the article suggests that we should see solitude as an opportunity.
An opportunity for what?
For self-discovery and reflection. It's in those quiet moments when we're by ourselves that we can really connect with our inner selves and figure out what truly matters to us.
So it's not about isolation. It's about intentionality.
Exactly. It's about choosing to spend time alone to nurture our thoughts and feelings.
To listen to our intuition.
Exactly. And that can be really empowering.
It is. It's like taking back control of our time and attention.
And focusing it on what truly nourishes our souls.
I love that.
Oh.
This deep dive is really shifting my perspective on privacy.
Me too. It's not about being secretive or hiding from the world.
It's about making space for things like authenticity,
Yeah.
self-discovery, and deep connection.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
And the article takes it even a step further.
Oh, wow.
It suggests that embracing privacy is ultimately an act of self-ownership.
Ooh, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Well, in a world where our data is constantly being collected and analyzed, and our attention is being pulled in a million different directions,
Yeah.
choosing privacy is a way of saying, my life is my own, and I get to decide what I share with the world.
It's like setting a boundary and saying, this is my personal space, and you can't just barge in.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly liberating, especially when we live in a culture that often equates visibility with worth.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
I agree. There's so much more to explore.
But before we get too carried away, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the most important takeaway is that privacy doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah, what would that look like in real life?
Well, it could be anything from being more mindful of what you post on social media
Okay.
to setting clear boundaries around work emails or even just carving out more time for quiet reflection.
It's about being intentional with our choices and making sure they align with what we truly value.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to experiment and figure out what feels best for you.
right? What works for one person might not work for another.
It's all about finding that sweet spot where you feel both connected and in control of your own space.
And remember, privacy isn't about cutting yourself off from the world.
Right.
It's about engaging with the world on your own terms.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, I think it's time for our thought-provoking question.
Oh, yes. I love this part.
Okay, so here it is. Think about a specific area in your life where you could benefit from a little more privacy.
Right.
It could be your online life, your relationships, your work, anything, really.
Mm.
What's one small change you could make today to start cultivating more privacy in that area?
That's a great question to ponder. And it's perfect for our listeners who are always looking for actionable steps they can take.
Exactly. It's not just about understanding the concept of privacy, it's about putting it into practice.
So take some time to reflect on that question and see what comes up for you.
Yeah, what insights emerge when you really start to consider how privacy shows up in different areas of your life?
And remember, we're not suggesting that you become a hermit and disappear from society.
Definitely not. The goal isn't to isolate yourself.
It's about finding that balance between connection and solitude.
A balance that feels authentic and empowering for you.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of privacy.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
We hope you gained some valuable insights and maybe even some inspiration to create a little more privacy in your own life.
Until next time, may your days be filled with meaningful connections and moments of blissful solitude.
And of course, if you want to learn even more about all this, the article that got us talking is called 15 Compelling Reasons to Embrace a Life of Privacy.
Yeah, it's a great read. And you know, one thing that really struck me about it was how it emphasized that privacy isn't like this set-in-stone thing.
Right. It's not like one size fits all.
Exactly. It evolves over time, you know?
Yeah, like what might have been considered private a generation ago might be totally normal to share now.
Totally. And the other way around, too.
It's true. Think about how much things have changed even in the past few years.
Oh, I know.
Like what people consider oversharing now might have been totally fine back then.
It's crazy how fast things are changing. It really makes you wonder what the future of privacy will look like.
Yeah. Will we swing back towards wanting more privacy, or will we keep going down this road of sharing everything?
It's a tough question to answer,
It really is.
but it's definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. We're not just summarizing information, we're exploring ideas and challenging the way we think about things.
And hopefully inspiring our listeners to do the same.
Exactly.
So whether you're a tech enthusiast, a social butterfly, or a quiet introvert, we hope this deep dive gave you something to think about.
Because at the end of the day, privacy is a personal choice.
It really is.
It's about figuring out what feels right for you and creating a life that aligns with your values.
So go ahead and embrace your privacy, or at least start thinking about it a little differently.
Thanks for joining us today.
Until next time,
Yeah.
stay curious and keep exploring.